You're listening to Forecast, the marketing podcast for professional services leaders. If you're looking to generate more leads, win more deals, and take your firm to the next level, this show is your shortcut.
Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ahmed Munawar, and today we are talking to Reuben Swartz, who's the founder of a company called Mimiran. And in today's conversation, we dive into the topic of how to generate more leads from your consulting website. Chances are, if you've got a website, which I hope you do, it's underperforming in that it's not doing the job it should be doing, which is generating leads for your services. So Reuben and I get into how you can generate more leads from your consulting website, specifically by creating a lead magnet and offering that on your website. A lead magnet is a piece of content that you can offer in exchange for someone's contact information. And we talk about what kind of lead magnets typically work best for a consulting practice and how you can create a lead magnet quickly and efficiently and put it up on your website for offer. Show notes are going to be at forecast.fm/Reuben. That's forecast.fm/REUBEN. Before I let you go, if you haven't yet joined us inside our free course on the 5 P's of lead generation for professional service firms, you're going to want to check that out. Inside the course, I will show you a step-by-step plan that you can use to generate a flood of new business for your firm. It's 100% free of charge, and you can get immediate access at 5leadgen.com. You can spell out 5 or use the number. Either one works. That's 5leadgen.com. Here's Reuben.
Reuben, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you get us started by telling us the story of how you got into consulting to begin with?
Well, I was one of those technology guys who literally had sandals and shorts and T-shirts and strolled into the office around 11 o'clock. And I didn't understand why these people wore dress shoes and dress pants and dress shirts and got on airplanes and talked to customers. That just sounded awful. And then somehow I would get pulled in when the discussions got really deep into the technology. And after doing this for a little while, I realized that as much as I like to think that the software was really where all the hard stuff happened, the software was relatively easy, as complicated as it was. The really hard stuff was helping the people achieve what they wanted to achieve, especially when different people might have slightly different goals, even within the same organization. And I thought, so much of the trouble that I had as a developer was related to a mismatch between what people were trying to do and what the software could do. Not necessarily that one was better than the other, but just there was sort of this game of corporate telephone going on. And so by the time it got back to me, I was spending a ton of time implementing things that maybe weren't the best solution for people. And I thought, gosh, once I've actually visited some customers and understand what they need to do, if I can combine understanding what they're trying to do with the knowledge of technology, I can put these things together and everyone can be much happier. That was at least the vision.
And so you were a developer at a company then? Like you were employed at a company as a developer?
That's right. And then I left to start my own consulting company thinking I can put together the strategy and the business process and the technology so that instead of having, say, a management consulting firm hand a slide deck to somebody and then have a committee create a bunch of requirements and then have, a year-long RFP process and then a 2-year-long implementation. This was big corporate software. It all took a long time. And at the end of it, everyone had been reorged around so many times you forgot why you were doing this in the first place. What if you could kind of bring all that stuff together holistically?
So what was it like going from in-house developer, by the way, walking into the office at 11 o'clock wearing shorts and flip-flops? I'm not sure why you would ever want to leave that life, but you did anyways. What was it like to go from that to, being an independent consultant, having to drum up your own business, service clients? What was that transition like?
Well, I like the servicing clients part, right? That was what I was good at. It was kind of like just the E-Myth once all over again, right? I could bake pies, so I thought it'd be great to open a bakery. And I was terrible at all the stuff that wasn't about the actual baking of the pies. So drumming up the business was, I think, my biggest problem, and it's usually the biggest problem. Was lucky enough to have great word of mouth, and so I was one of those people who said all of my business comes from referrals. And at the time, I was really proud of that because I thought of sales and marketing as still being somewhat dirty, even though I was a sales and marketing consultant. So none of that really makes sense when I look back on it. But the mindset I had at the time, that was how I looked at it. And I didn't realize that I was missing out on the vast majority of the potential market.
So how did you overcome that when you first went out on your own and you realized that sales and marketing was a bit of a challenge and certainly harder than you thought it would be? What did you do to get over that hump?
Well, I don't know if I did it very well, first of all. I think I'm a poster child for what not to do. And like I said, all of my business ended up coming from word of mouth. I didn't really have an effective sales and marketing engine. I tried a whole bunch of different things, half-heartedly and poorly. And so I kept coming back to, well, word of mouth works. Let's do that. This other stuff doesn't work. And it took me a long time to figure out why some of that didn't work, especially when it came to various types of web marketing. And every year we'd refresh our website and say, well, now we're going to get more leads and whatever. And it never really worked out that way. And it wasn't until I started helping my clients with some of that stuff. It's kind of like the end of The Usual Suspects or whatever, where everything goes in slow-mo and all the pieces come into focus. And it should have been obvious to me at the time, but it wasn't, that I was doing all the wrong things to drum up business, especially online.
And so what were those realizations or those light bulb moments that went off when you started working with clients?
Well, I was helping folks with the very end of their sales process, the proposals, and they were saying, hey, this is great. Proposals are no longer the bottleneck in my business. I'd like to send a whole lot more of them. What should I be doing to get more leads? You're a pretty smart web guy. Not that I really am, but for some people, it's like, oh, you're a computer guy. You must know a lot about the web, right? And I guess in some senses, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So I started looking at their websites, and that was exactly when it happened. I was like, these consulting websites are exactly like my consulting website was back in the day. There's a whole bunch of stuff that was there to try to prove how smart we were and how innovative and how cool our methodology was. I mean, we actually used the word methodology. I think we had a whole page about it. And then we would have forms where people could fill in their first name, last name, title, company, phone number, blood type, whatever, if they wanted to contact us. And then we also had some, hey, grab this PDF. It's so brilliant. You're going to love it and you're going to call us. And so many consultants sort of have a website like this where they're trying to look like a giant consulting company, and they've got some really unfriendly forms for people to fill out to get a phone call, or they've got some anonymous PDF downloads that someone can grab. But they don't have a great way of converting a visitor into a lead.
So walk us through some of the changes that you made, presumably to your clients' websites as well as your own.
Sure. Well, one of the big realizations I had was that there was a time when a website was just a thing. It was like a shingle, like, look, you're a real business. You have a website. Holy cow. Not everyone does. Now everyone has a website. It's moved beyond a shingle to prove that you exist. And for most consultants, the website really has one job, and that's to get leads. The only exception I can think of is if you're also trying to recruit people, you might be trying to get leads for actual employees or subcontractors. But that's really the job of the website. And once you think of it that way, everything gets much more clear. So all that stuff about, paragraphs and paragraphs of text about how cool we were, or how some of my customers had some of the same stuff on there, none of that's helpful if people don't want to read it. They don't want to read that stuff online. What do they want to do? They want some information about a problem, right? They are not there to just be in awe of your genius and expertise. So what can you do to help them solve a problem that they have and make their life better? If you think of the website that way, things get a lot more, they get a lot more clear in terms of what are we actually trying to do.
So let's jump in from there into the topic of lead magnets, which is where we want to kind of focus today. You recommend that folks offer some kind of a lead magnet as a call to action on their websites. How does that work?
Sure. And so for folks who don't know what a quote unquote lead magnet is, it's something that attracts a lead to you. So you've got a visitor on your website and you don't know who they are. And for most of us on our consulting websites, that person's going to hit a page. If you're lucky, they go to a couple other pages and then they leave and they never come back. And so we want a way to almost decloak them from a visitor to a lead. And the difference there is when they're a lead, I at least have an email address or some other contact information so that I can market to them or discuss things with them directly. So the lead magnet, it says, well, if I just put a box up there, and so many people do this, enter your email address to get on our newsletter. Well, I mean, that's kind of a poor lead magnet in many cases because it may not be super attractive to people. The more powerful the magnet is, the more likely someone is to enter their contact info and say, yes, gosh, I'd love to get that lead magnet. I'd love to get that information.
Now, I mean, this may be kind of obvious, but I just want to make sure this is really clear. Explain to folks why having a lead magnet, all things considered, even if it's not a very good lead magnet, but a relatively decent lead magnet, is going to convert better on your website than if you had, say, a contact form.
Sure. And I mean, in some senses, a contact form is a lead magnet for a very specific type of visitor. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a contact us page or a button on your website, but that's someone who's like already there, probably a referral, somebody who has some reason to not only know that they have the problem that you solve, but know who you are and they want to work with you. Most people coming to your website are not in that stage. So if you're only targeting those people, you're missing out on 99+% of the opportunities from visitors coming to your website. So these are folks who are a little bit higher up in the funnel, who are maybe exploring the problem space that you're dealing with, or maybe they understand they have a problem, but they need to understand certain characteristics of what a potential solution might look like. So they're looking for information. They're not just looking for a callback.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about this is if you look at the buyer's journey, roughly you get 3 stages: awareness, consideration, decision. If you just have a contact form that's a direct, hey, let's talk, let's solve your problem, you're only going to get people in the late consideration decision stage of the process. You're losing all those people in the awareness stage, and the problem is that not only are you losing them, but you're likely not even aware of how much you're losing because those folks may have been engaged in a more meaningful way earlier in their journey by another firm. And then when it comes to decision time, well, they're not going to pick the firm that hasn't offered value. They're going to pick the firm that's been educating them up until that point.
Absolutely.
So with that said, how do you tackle this idea of a lead magnet? Like, where do you begin to come up with what the idea is going to be, what you're going to cover, what format you use? How do you tackle all of that?
Sure. Great question. And I think, like a lot of folks, I went through way too much angst over this. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be an ebook. It doesn't have to be a professionally produced half-hour educational video like you'd expect to find on a NASA website. I like to start with, what do your customers come to you for and what do you do for them? And in fact, when I do this for some of my customers, I'll actually go talk to their customers. If some of these folks have no pre-existing content, they have no idea and no time. So like, okay, fine. I will just go talk to your customers and find out what you do for them, because it's going to be different than what you say it is. And so if you're stuck, that's the starting point. What do your customers say you do? What problems did they have? What are the words they use? And why did they turn to you? And what do they think about that? If you'd like, we can put a link in the show notes. I've got a list of 22 consulting lead magnet concepts just to kind of get your brain started. But really think about, what do I do for people and what's different about my approach? If there's a unique twist to it. For example, you're a marketing consultant for consultants. And so you might have something like why marketing for consulting is different, or how to do marketing consulting for your consulting business without sacrificing billable hours, or something like that. Something that's going to speak to not only the problem that people have, but maybe one of the obstacles they face when they try to solve it.
Yeah, my advice is usually pick the one topic that's top of mind for your buyer with regards to what you do, right? So you solve a particular business problem. Depending on who your buyer is, they're going to see that problem in different lights. So you want to pick something that's top of mind, gets their attention, it's something they're struggling with, and you want to make that your lead in. And you don't need to say everything in your lead magnet. I want to get into this with you as well. I don't think you need to say everything in your lead magnet. You need to say enough to kind of whet their appetite. This is likely the first kind of interaction they're having with you, and make them curious to want to learn more. But what's your take on that? How much should you try to convey in a lead magnet?
My notion is if you don't have a lead magnet out there right now, just start with something really simple, because whatever you put out there is going to be better than nothing. I think so many people kind of have this on the back burner and they never actually get it out there because having something viable that's not perfect just seems unacceptable to them. And I think your notion is exactly right. You don't want it to cast you in a bad light and be unprofessional and full of spelling errors and whatnot. But as long as it's useful, if it adds value to people in that target market that you've got, that's good enough. You're not trying to actually solve your whole consulting practice in one free lead magnet. Just get something out there. And I think the other nice thing is people might have multiple ideas of what they want to do. Start with one. Get one thing on your website. And then you can always go and you can split up the calls to action. So for example, on different pages, you could have a link to the same lead magnet, but with a slightly different call to action that's more aligned with what you have on that page. It's one of the nice things about the web. If someone's on a certain page, they're likely to have certain interests. And then later, as you go forward, you can create more than one lead magnet to attract slightly different buyers, people on slightly different pages. You can always make things more complicated, but you don't have to necessarily go in and set up a whole massively complex funnel at the beginning. Just get one thing out there that's going to be helpful for your audience.
Yeah, and remember, they don't have a lot of time either, right? So not only would it take you a long time to, build a 15, 20 page white paper or some really dense lead magnet, they likely don't have the time to read it. And I mean, how many of us have ebooks, sitting on our desktop or, just like gathering dust in our inbox that we downloaded because the topic was interesting, but who's got the time to consume all that content? Very few people. So the shorter and sweeter it is, not only is it easier for you to produce, it's easier for them to consume. And that's, I think, a critical piece that people forget, right? If it's easier for them to consume, they're more likely to consume it and they're going to get the value from it, which is ultimately the goal of all this.
Absolutely. And I think that point about ebooks is so important. So many people have that as a to-do item on their marketing plan, and then they never actually get to it, which is probably good because, to your point, it's not necessarily the most effective thing anyway. Let's give something that's respectful of our audience's time as well. And it's like Oscar Wilde said, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I didn't have time to make it shorter, right? Make it short and sweet so that it's something that is respectful of your audience's time. And sometimes it's as simple as take a couple blog posts that people like and edit them down a little bit or turn them into a list form or something like that. If you're stuck and you just don't have time to produce content, but you've got some stuff on your blog that people have responded to, that's great. And then if there's anything you can do where you have a strong opinion about something, that's often super useful too. Like if you say, and I'm just making this up, marketing for consultants that's only on Twitter or something like that, or why Twitter doesn't work for marketing consultants, or you have some strong opinion, you can use that as a lead magnet, because for the folks who are in your target audience, they're going to be attracted to that strong opinion, and they may or may not be qualified, right? They might fall on either side of the fence, but that way the people who come through that gate, they're really aligned with your philosophy.
So let's do this. Let me ask you this question. Let's say I've got a consulting firm, I don't have a ton of content on my website, don't have a very active blog. I don't have a lot that I could really repurpose. I want to get a lead magnet out as soon as possible so I can, get all the benefits that you're talking about. What's the one type of lead magnet that you think would be easiest for me to produce and would work the best? I've got an answer to this too, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, I think the thing that's easiest to produce is often that's a very personal question, right? Some people cannot write a paragraph to save their lives, but they can sit in front of a webcam and talk very persuasively. And so in those cases, I say, hey, just record a video. If you want to, you can always pay someone to transcribe it later, but you can literally have a video lead magnet. That's fine too. Other folks would never get in front of a camera, but they can write really eloquently, have somebody, you can just sit down and write whatever it is you want to talk about. I think the more important thing that you're getting at is what is the topic? And I think that's going to go to what do you help your customers do, right? When they come to you, what are they struggling with and why can't they fix it? So if it's, I want to do marketing for my consulting firm, but I spend all of my time on billing or management or something else, here's how to do consulting marketing without on less than 2 hours a month or whatever it is, right? There's like the problem and then the sub problem that prevents you from solving the real problem. Go attack those.
So if you had to pick one from your list of 22, and I'm cheating here, folks who are listening can't see it, but they can grab the list in the show notes. If you had to pick your one favorite lead magnet from the list of 22, which one's your favorite?
You know, that's like telling me asking me which is my favorite child.
I hope you don't have 22 kids though.
No, that's a good point. But it really is about what's in the. What are you going to talk about? And a lot of times people, the thing that I find interesting is if I don't ask someone about lead magnets and I just talk to them about their business, they are so smart and so on point, and I'm just like getting excited hearing about it, even though they don't necessarily serve me as a customer. And I'm like, these people are great. And I say, okay, great, put that in a lead magnet. And all of a sudden they get brain freeze, right? It's like, you can talk about something that you care about very easily, but somehow when we go to put it on paper or put it on the screen, it seems a lot harder. And my notion is literally, if you're stuck, go have a drink with a buddy or a colleague or whatever and have that conversation and have them just take a few notes, and then boom, here's your lead magnet. I heard these 5 things. Here's the thing people struggle with. Here's why they really can't fix it themselves. Here are 3 things they should be doing to try to fix it that they could go do themselves. And if they can't, here's why they should call me or whatever, right? But you'll get that in 10 minutes and 2 beers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be honest, my favorite format from your list, and not to say that it's the most effective format necessarily, although I think it is very effective, but it's the easiest. If you compare kind of effort to effectiveness, I think you get the highest return with this one, is the email course. Everybody writes emails, right? Like if you're a consultant that doesn't write emails, I want to talk to you because I don't know how you're running your business. Everybody writes emails. You're probably pretty good at writing emails. It's not that complicated. It's not scary like getting on camera is for a lot of people. And you can break down, the 5-day email course is a pretty popular thing now for a good reason, right? You can break down any topic into 5 parts, right? 5 steps to solving X problem, 5 things you should know before you do Y, right? A lot of the kind of topical ideas that you have on your list here could be fulfilled through an email course. And the good thing about an email course is you can't, download the PDF and then unsubscribe. You got to stay on the list to get all the content, and then drip by drip. And it's a little bit every day, right? It's not too much. It's not a massive PDF to read all in one shot. It's drip by drip over time. I'm more likely to consume it. I'm more likely to stay on your list, and it's easy for you to produce.
So I'm going to have, I like what you're saying, but I'm going to have 2 caveats to that. One is, if you're just starting out, a lot of people would rather produce 1 piece of content than say 5 pieces of content. And I know from experience with my customers, right, the notion of, okay, if we've got leads, what sequence should I use? Gosh, now I need to have 80 emails. Oh my goodness, this is getting complicated. So I'd say if you're really stuck, don't necessarily have to start with an email course. Put that knowledge into a single piece of content. And then as you're saying, if you have a PDF that someone can grab and then just leave and never come back, that's not necessarily helpful, because we do want to get these visitors to become leads, but we also need to get that lead to get into a conversation with us, right? We want to be able to qualify them and see what they're up to. And so obviously I have a little bit of a bias here, but my notion is we want to have this content be online. We want to have it be gated by their email address or some other token, but we don't necessarily want it to just be a PDF that they can grab and leave.
Right. So you're saying have it kind of hosted somewhere on your website? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you could have it hosted on your website, right? Obviously, I've got technology that does this for you. As to your point, if you've got an email that goes out over time, you have to keep waiting for the next email to come. But something that allows you to know if people are engaged so that you can segment and focus on the folks who are going to be the best fit.
Got it. Right. So, for example, in my case, my lead magnet is actually, this might be fun. Let's critique my lead magnet a little bit. You tell me what I'm doing wrong. So my lead magnet is a 5-day course on lead generation for professional services firms. So I've got a framework that I developed called the 5 Ps of lead generation. I cover each of the 5 Ps in one day. and it's video based. So actually I've got video and I've got audio and I've got transcripts, and that's all posted on a page on my website. So when you opt into the course, you get 5 emails every day for 5 days, one a day. And there's a little blurb to introduce the topic in each email. And then there's a link to go to my website where you get the video or audio or transcript if you prefer to consume it other ways.
I think it's great. I went through it.
Oh, good. So you like it. I'm on the right track.
Absolutely. And I guess the key thing is it working for you? And I think you are way ahead of where a lot of consultants are in terms of your marketing savvy, right? Which is a good thing because you're helping people market better. But for a lot of folks who are still in the baking pie mode, but I know I need to do the other stuff to market my bakery, what you're doing is great. Some of those other ideas off my list would be useful. As long as you're doing something that gets you some extra business, you're ahead of where your baseline is. And you can always improve it over time. I think it's a little easy to get intimidated by, if you think about somebody who's doing just a totally bang up job marketing, and they've got a calendar and they've got all these different things across different channels and it's all cross promoted and so on. And you're like, gosh, I barely have half an hour to breathe. How am I going to do all this stuff? I say start really simply. If you're getting 0 web leads, right, getting 1 lead a month is going to be super useful. Even if you close, you close a quarter of them, you get 3 extra deals in a year. Suppose you're getting 10 leads a month now. Well, what could you do to get 15, to get 20, and so on? You don't necessarily have to go 0 to 60 all in one go.
Yeah, and I suppose, what I'm doing is not terribly complicated. What's complicated is the multimedia, the video and the audio. But you could do exactly what I'm doing as an email course, but post the long form article, the full content on a page on your website. Very similar to what you've done with your 22 consulting lead magnets. So each email could be
Absolutely.
a little bit of a teaser, and the goal of the email is to get the click, basically, right? And they click over to your website, and it's basically a long form article, and I think that's very doable for most people. But listen, Reuben, let's jump into kind of the last segment of today's conversation. I've got a lead magnet in place now, but people are downloading it. They seem to be interacting with it. How do I take all of that activity and turn that into an actual client?
Sure. And that's really the thing, right? This whole thing is a process from visitor to lead to conversation to proposal to client. And one of the things we want to do is we want to have a good way. We talked about the lead magnet as a good way to turn a visitor to a lead. And I think one of the things that I should mention there is people have this habit of they want to ask for a ton of information on that form. And one thing that I believe in is we don't want to show a big nasty form. It just turns off visitors. I want to show people a button and let them click on the button and then ask for the minimal amount of information. I usually ask for email and then an optional phone number. It's like if they want to put in a phone, that's up to them, and then it makes it easy to call them. If they don't, I don't necessarily want them to get kicked out of my funnel because they weren't ready to give a phone number at that time. You can always find out phone numbers later for good leads. And if you've got someone's email address, you can find out an awful lot about them, at least for most people who are on LinkedIn or otherwise active online. So don't try to get everything up front, right? Think about it. You're building a relationship over time as you go deeper into the funnel. Then the thing that you want to do is have some notion of, if I can tell who they are, who are my good leads that I really want to follow up with? Have a follow-up email sequence. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complete course. It could just be a little bit of some thoughts based around the lead magnet. Could simply be your newsletter that you're already sending out. Just stick people on the newsletter when they grab your lead magnet. Just something so that you're interacting with them on a regular basis. And then something that I like about my lead magnet technology is I know when people are interacting with it. So I know that right before this interview, you pulled up that lead magnet list in a very meta exploration of what we're talking about here. And that's really useful for busy people because if you get a lead, if you can follow up with them in the first 5 minutes, you are exponentially more likely to make contact than if you wait even 24 hours. And if you are a small consulting shop, there is just no way that you can guarantee that instant response. You have to be able to get more at-bats, and getting email open notifications is useful. But if you can get something that's reliable and shows you when people are interacting with your content, it just gives you so many more at-bats than that initial lead. And then being able to look at, okay, here's the list of folks who have grabbed a lead magnet, for example, in the past week. What have they done with it? Who hasn't even read it yet? Who are the ones that I really want to make sure I hit as a follow-up? Phone call, email, etc. And if you have some interactivity with your lead magnet, ROI calculator or some other thing that's going to be helpful for the visitor, but also for you in terms of qualification, that can help you prioritize who these leads are. I think one of the things that people seem to be really worried about is they're going to get so many leads that aren't good that it's just going to destroy their business. And you see people with like the CAPTCHA forms on their contact forms, right? Like, prove that you're a human before you can talk to us. And I'm kind of like, having more leads, having some false positives is much better than excluding people from the funnel. It doesn't take long to delete a lead or mark them as a lost lead or whatever. But I'd rather do that 100 times and let one really great lead come through than be so worried about, oh gosh, I'm going to spend 3 seconds deleting this email that isn't very good. So have a strategy to follow up and get that conversation. And then if you have the conversation, you already know something about what they're interested in from the lead magnet that they got. And especially if you have more than one lead magnet, that makes it even easier to segment them. But let's just suppose you have one, they're interested at some level in what you're doing. They may not be a fit as a prospect yet, but you can have that conversation and find out.
So listen, if folks are listening to this and they're thinking, hey, that sounds great, I really wish I had a friendly sales robot to help me with all of this. What would you say to them?
I have a solution for that. I do have a friendly sales robot, which I was trying to avoid talking about directly, even though it is kind of what I do. So it's hard to avoid pitching it a little bit. But all the technology that I've built at Mimeren is about converting visitors to leads and leads to conversations and conversations through to e-sign proposals. And it's really built because as a consultant, this was all the stuff I was so crappy about. We couldn't sell except by word of mouth. And then when we did, it was all very clumsy and ridiculous because we were great at baking pies and not very good at the sales and marketing for the bakery. And I thought, gosh, so much of this stuff is just easy to automate. A computer should be doing a lot of this work so that we can focus on the stuff that we're good at, right? We're good at having conversations with people, even a quote unquote sales conversation, because people could tell we knew our stuff. We obviously cared a lot. Those conversations would go really well. We just didn't have enough of them. And then it was hard to convert that conversation into a successful proposal efficiently. Well, guess what? If you have a friendly sales robot that can bring you some of those leads, set you up for the conversation, and then make it easy to turn the conversation into a closed deal, that can only be helpful.
Absolutely. And the tool, from what I've seen, looks very, very powerful and incredibly useful. Reuben, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Tell folks where they can go to look you up and learn more about you and Mimeren.
Thanks so much for having me. If you go to Mimeren, that's MIMIRAN.com, you can find a whole bunch of sample proposals and sample lead magnets on there. And you can also find me over at salesfornerds.io, which is my podcast for techie people who end up having to do sales and marketing.
Awesome. We're going to have links to all of that in the show notes. Reuben, thanks again.
Thanks. Have a great one.
Hey, it's Ahmed here again. Before I let you go, there are two things I want you to do. The first is, if you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe to the show on iTunes or Google Play by visiting forecast.fm and clicking on the relevant link. While you're at it, please do leave us a rating or a review because it helps more people discover the show. The second thing is I want you to grab my free course on the 5 Ps of lead generation for professional services firms. Inside the course, you will get a step-by-step framework to help you generate a flood of new business for your firm. The course is 100% free of charge, and you can get immediate access at 5leadgen.com, and you can spell out 5 or use the number. Either one works. That's 5leadgen.com. Thanks for listening.